The Yasna advances to the naming of the objects of propitiation. 1. With a berisman brought to its appointed place, accompanied with the Za'athra. At the time of Havana, I desire to approach the Nyazda offering with my praise, as it is consumed, and likewise a merit at as the guardian of plants and wood, and Ha'ur Vatat, who guards the waters, with the fresh meat for the propitiation of Ahura Mazda and of the bountiful immortals, and for the propitiation of Sa'asha, who is obedience, the blessed, who is endowed with sanctity, and who smites with the blow of victory and causes the settlements to advance. 2. And I desire to approach Ha'ama and Para Ha'ama with my praise for the propitiation of the Favasha of Spitama Zarathustra, the saint, and I desire to approach the sacred wood with my praise, with the perfume for the propitiation of thee, the fire, O Ahura Mazda's son. 3. And I desire to approach the Ha'amas with my praise for the propitiation of the good waters which Mazda created, and I desire to approach the Ha'ama water and the fresh milk with my praise, and the plant Hadha Epata offered with sanctity for the propitiation of the waters which are Mazda made. 4. And I desire to approach this Bersman with the Za'athra with my praise, with its binding, and spread with sanctity for the propitiation of the bountiful immortals. And I desire with my voice the thoughts well thought, and the words well spoken, and the deeds well done, and the recital of the Gathas as they are heard. And I desire to approach the well-said Mathras with my praise, and this higher lordship with this sanctity, and this exact regulation of the Ratu, and the reverential prayer for blessings spoken at the fitting hour. And I desire to approach them for the contentment and propitiation of the holy Yazads, heavenly and earthly, and for the contentment of each man's soul. 5. And I desire to approach the Asnya with my praise, the lords of the ritual order, and the Havana, and the Safange, and Bisya, the holy lords of the ritual order, and I desire to approach with the Yast of Mithra, and of the wide pastures, of the 1,000 ears, of the myriad eyes, the Yazad of the spoken name, and with him Raman Vastra. 6. And I desire to approach Rapithwina with my praise, the holy lord of the ritual order, and Fradat Vshu, and Zentuma, and righteousness the best, and Ahura Mazda's fire. 7. And I desire to approach Uze Irina, and Fradat Vira, and Da Vyuma with my praise, with that lofty Ahura, Napat, Apam, and the waters Mazda made. 8. And Aewis Ruthrima, and Aebig Aya, and Fradat Vis Pam, Hugaete, and Zarathustrotema, with the Yast of the Fervashus of the saints, and of the women who may have many sons, and the year-long unchanged prosperity, and of might the well-shaped and stately, smiting victoriously, Ahura made, and of the victorious ascendancy, which it secures. 9. And I desire to approach Ushahina, Beragya, and Namanya with the yast of Sra'asha, obedience, the sacred, the holy, who smites with the blow of victory, and makes the settlements advance with that of Rashnu, the most just, and Arstat, who furthers the settlements and causes them to increase. 10. And I desire to approach the monthly festivals, the lords of the ritual order, and the new moon and the waning moon and the full moon, which scatters night. 11. And the yearly festivals, Ma'adio, Saremaya, Ma'adio, Shema, Pa'ite, Shahya, and Ayathrima, the breeder who spends the strength of males, and Ma'ed Ya'irya, and Hamas Pathma Edaya, and the seasons, the lords of the ritual order. 12. And all those lords who are the 33, who approach the nearest at the time of Havana, who were the lords of Asha, called Vahishta, and whose services were inculcated by Mazda and pronounced by Zarathustra as the feasts of righteousness, the best. And I desire to approach Ahura and Mithra, the lofty and imperishable, to the holy, and with the yast of those stars, which are the creatures of Spenta Ma'inu, and with the yast of the star Testuriya, the radiant, the glorious, and with that of the moon, which contains the seed of cattle, and with that of the resplendent sun, the eye of Ahura Mazda and of Mithra, Providence Lord of the provinces, and with that of Ahura Mazda, as he rules this day, the radiant, the glorious, and with that of the Frafashes of the saints, who rule this month. 14. And with thy yast, the fires, O Ahura Mazda's son, with all the fires, and to the good waters, with the yast of all the waters, which are Mazda made, and with that of all the plants, which Mazda made. 15. And I desire to approach with the yast of the Mathra Spenta, the holy, the effective, the law composed against the Davas, and the Zarathustrian, and that of the long descent of the religion which Mazda gave. 16. And I desire to approach with the yast of Mount Ushe Darena, Mazda made, and of all, glorious with sanctity and abundant in brilliance, and with that of the kingly glory, Mazda made, yea, with that of the unconsumed glory, which Mazda made, and with that of the Asha Bangohe, and Keste Bangohe, and with that of the good Aretha, and of the good Rasastat, and the good glory, and of the benefit which Mazda gave. 17. And I desire to approach with the yast of the good and pious blessing of the pious man, and of the saint, and with that of the awful and swift curse of the wise, the Yazad curse. 18. And to these places, regions, pastures, and abodes, with the water springs, and with that of the waters, and of the lands, the plants, and with that of the earth, and yon heaven, and with that of the holy wind, and of the stars, moon, and sun, and with that of the stars without beginning, self-determined and self-moved, with that of all the holy creatures, which are those of Spenta Ma'inu, male and female, regulators of the holy ritual order. 19. And with that of the lofty Lord, who is righteousness, himself the essence of the ritual, and with that of the days in their duration, and of the days during the daylight, and with that of the monthly festivals, and the yearly festivals, and with those of the several seasons, which are the lords of the ritual at the time of Havana. 20. And I desire to approach the meat offering with the yast, and Harvatat, who guards the waters, and Amerit Ut, who guards the plants and wood, with the guest of the sacred flesh, for the propitiation of Sra'asha, of the daring spear, the lordly, the Yazad of the spoken name. 21. And I desire to approach both Ha'ama and the Ha'ama Jews, with the Yast for the propitiation of the Propasha of Zarathustra Spitma, the saint, the Yazad of the spoken name, and I desire to approach the wood bellets with the Yast, with a perfume for the propitiation of thee, O fire, the fire, O Hermas' son, the Yazad of the spoken name. 22. And a desire to approach with a Yast for the mighty Vervashis of the saints, the overwhelming, the Vervashis of those who held to the ancient lore and of those next of kin. 23. And I desire to approach towards all the lords of the ritual order with a Yast, toward all the good Yazads, heavenly and earthly, who are set for worship and for praise because of Asha Mahista, of righteousness the best. 24. I will confess myself a Mazda Yastian of Zarathustra's order, a foe to the Da'avas, devoted to the lore of the Lord for Havana, the Holy Lord of the ritual order for sacrifice, homage, propitiation, and for praise, and for Savange and Visya, the Holy Lords of the ritual order, and for the sacrifice, homage, propitiation, and praise of the day lords of the days, in the duration, and of the days during daylight, and for their month regulations and their year regulations, and for those of the several seasons, for sacrifice and homage, their propitiation and their praise. The Sa'atar speaks as the Ahu to be revered and chosen. Let the priest speak forth to me. The Ratu responds as the Ahu to be revered and chosen. Let him who is the Sa'atar speak forth to me. The Sa'atar again. So let the Ratu from his righteousness, holy and learned, speak forth. And it's important with these rituals, if there's multiple people or people are present, for them to respond too. Something you see in these later grimoires sometimes is that, okay, here's this list of entities and whatnot. In this case, we're just listening to on the side. If you're worshiping with the following mentions, you're glorifying, you're honoring these entities through, telling of them, basically, thus continuing their legacy out of worship of God. But see, you have a couple entities. So in the grimoires, these things would be separate. It'd be all about it wouldn't be, the worship wouldn't be the point. I mean, it would be done, but they would have this pair of witnesses, and the pair of witnesses would be called towards, but so we are at the comment, somewhere in the comment. We are still in the comment of the doctrine of dualism, homage to Ahura. And that's way too much like something else, but I hardly agree. What's the note? Oh, in the middle. Make us vigorous. In verse 9, we have, I hardly agree to reading Verezenyau Zakir in the sense of homes. The meaning is to endow us with efficiency and the pursuit of the objects mentioned in the context are the propitiation and reverential honor may have been more directly in the composer's mind. He may endow our worship with the efficiency that it may accomplish its desired result. See the positions of the words. The Polyphy translation also bears witness to the rendering above with its erroneous are free Varzidar Ayo Lanman. And so towards the end of the verse, we have, and bearing of the good mind. It's impossible for those who have studied the subject to believe that the Pahlavi translator did not know the meaning of Amav Andi in Zend. We must suppose him to have had some form, like Hazah, before him, instead of Huzah Thwat. The Pahlavi translator renders the word for persistent energy in verse 10 there. In two other places by Pavan, Astubi. He evidently had some reason for seeing a form of Naman here. The natural conclusion is that his manuscript read differently in this place. Naryosang renders him appropriately. And the dawn to grant, well, I guess that etymologically makes its way over to what the Celts mentioned in the Donna. Anyways, looks like an accusative here, according to Bartholomew. Otherwise, the two verbs must be regarded as having indefinite pronouns. Understood. One assigns, and they grant. I cannot see the applicability of Agni's title, the house lord, here. Compare Damsupatni as an adjective referring to Pati. And the last note, Mazda Lord, the previous, the saving power in verse 11. He who opposed the Avas, they returning the contempt, is probably the same person expressed by the two Ho'e in the previous verse. It is therefore Ahura, but the words which mean friend, brother, father are grammatically connected with Ye, Ma'in, Yata, the one who reverenced Ahura. The expression father gives a strong impression that Ahura is referred to, notwithstanding the vocative, particularly as we have father in verse 4. The word brother, however, inclines one to the more closely grammatical view. Now, we understand, like, when we're talking about to God and even the spiritual community, this family language stuff is, can't take it literally. So note, we are on to the personal sufferings, hopes, and appeals chapter. So the translation of verse 1, to what land to turn. The Pahlavi translator sees the unusual meaning in Namo and Namo. He also accepts Kam, Zam adverbially after the constant Greek usage. In what land shall I establish my religion? As it is here rejected, whether my praises of the true God. Oh, I'm not doing that in the commentary. Of the true God shall I go. The rendering is so much richer that I turn from it with great reluctance. And on the part of, still in the same verse, it is to be regretted that able scholars should so hastily change the Gathic text here without first trying to render it as it is. Well, this is all the more necessary as each independent writer disputes emendations. Pa'eri, I think, ought to stand. The Hava etu, Ir Yaman, and Verezenem are also elsewhere alluded to as pertaining to the hostile party sometimes, and therefore not among those from among whom Para, the prophet, would be expelled. And there's the suggestion, the giving in the same verse. Da et is a third plural, has long been suggested with eagerness a discovery. its subjects would then be Kshnaus, and that implied in Ya Verezena, but the construction is difficult thus, and it may be greatly doubted whether we had not better alter our discovery back to the singular with the Pahlavi. I am greatly confirmed my view of the grammatical form of Kshnaus by Bartholomew's decision for a nominal form. Otherwise, it would be a third singular with loss of the final dental. Heka, these, even such as these, seems to be an irregular form. See Yasna 58, verse 4. I can only make an exclamatory isk, talisk of it. The Pahlavi renders freely, as if some form of he equals to bind were before him. Recall ho is, or perhaps he read haka, rendering as these altogether. Hamsa yakik. Now Yoseng has ye, savas, reneyo, and so the kind complained. The next verse here, in Yasna 29, verse 9, as Ana Esha, so also the Pahlavi explaining Akvastar, Aiglam, Denman, Atubanike, Maman, Ra'i, Kavit Unam, he proceeds, Le Amat Kam Ramak, Va Amatek Kam Gabra, Homanam, explaining Ana Esho as not being an Isha Kshatra. Ma equals Sma, notwithstanding its position. And further on in verse 2, declare and teach to me the Nim Waher, has long since circulated as a rendering for akso, and with esteem in the sense of prayer, it has afforded the admirable sense. Observe, take heed of the desire of the pious, but we have a positive proof of the meaning teach. Declare for ksa. See Yasna 65, verse 9, and also Yasna 28, verse 5, that Ahura possessed an Iste is clear from Yasna 34, verse 5, and if the sage could ask, what is your Iste, wealth, what is your kingdom, power over possessions, it is certainly not strange to suppose that he could say here, tell me concerning your wealth, especially as he bewails his poverty. Iste is in antithesis to the idea expressed in Kam Nafshva and Kam Nana. So also the Pahlavi, as translated by the Persian Hazana. And the days enlighteners in verse 3. Ukshano would seem to be an ancient error for Ushano, as the Pahlavi translator renders it as if reading Usha in Yasna 50, verse 10, and not Uksha. Otherwise, increasers of the days is a fine expression, but suspicious in view of the Pahlavi rendering in Yasna 50, verse 10. Neryo Seng's Vika Sayitrio is striking, but I cannot claim for it all that seems to offer, as Neryo Seng elsewhere renders forms of Vaksh by those of Kas. The Persian follows the Pahlavi. And in the fellow worker thing, we have, compare to Yasna 44 verse 1. And in verse 4 we have holding back pa in the sense of keeping back from welfare, as well as in that of protection, a sense first taught us by the Pahlavi writers is now at last generally acknowledged. It now, like many other suggestions of the Pahlavi, actually casts light in the rendering of the analogous Vedic word. And so we have verse 10 from Progress, the kind. So, the mass of the manuscript with the Pahlavi, Min Frava Misno, the Persian as Raftan. The expression might refer to the going of the kine as representing the people in her path. And remember the Uru's rune of the Celts, And a comparison with Yasna 31 verse 18 is drawn with the mention of the province. The evil governor endowed with evil might. The Pahlavi, Zak, E Pavan, Dus, Stahamak. Taryosong has Dushto, Balat, Kari. The elements seem to be Duz, and then Hazo, and then Ba'a, and then R, which is the same as Va'a, for instead of O, if it's not doing that. I'm trying to do that. Ush in Iranian seems to have the same sense of destruction combined with it sometimes. Hence, Asha and Kar can well mean attain to. Pathmeng, As is paths. So far as a rendered gives a far feebler sense than that indicated by the first Zendist, the Pahlavi writer. The wisdom of preparing stores for the kine, even if we suppose an animal only to be meant, page 100, is obvious. The Iranian writer was something very different from that in India, but the kine is not alluded to without a certain figurative meaning. She represents the people, and as such she cried aloud, and Zarathustra received the commission to relieve her sufferings as such, that the word hukis stands in the genitive should not disturb us. The care for the kine was a matter of national importance, and wisdom could not better be exercised than in this direction. And we may render with the next verse, 5, applicant with injury. We may render he who as a ruler does not bestow favors upon him who approaches with injury. The hint of the Pahlavi favors this. And then we have towards the end of the verse to that hostile. Hava et tave is here as in Yasna 33 verse 4 and 32 verse 1. And the first verse of this chapter, the hostile chieftain is called kinsman in an aristocratic sense by Zarathustra and his group. And he compares Uzu'ith Ya'uska, which is used of the breaking forth of water. The Pahlavi translator seems to have had some such idea. Moon la hen gido, but with him the entire line which divides all writers favor the sense in saving him from his impiety. Krunyat is a verbal form with parphalama. The Pahlavi translator sees the root is, to wish in Ismano, who does not willingly approach him, or does not approach desiring and seeking him. And I'm gratified to see another writer takes this view in the line he has ver folget, and with stern reproof in verse 6. And the enchainer in the same verse, ha'eth ahya, as a masculine, that's awkward, but as would be ba'eth ahya, so the pahlavi of the terrifier. A locative of ha'ithya may be correct, taking daman also as a locative. Otherwise, to the creatures of the lie and the enchainer are terrifier, and are as thou didst make the souls at first, is thou didst fix the moral laws. And in verse 7, hast thou, Mazda, hast thou, so with K6 and K9, okay, the manuscripts, and set me. Some render me here, who seem elsewhere loath to translate thwavant as like thee. The kshma vato, thwa vas, and mavaete in Yasna 44 verse 1 may be rendered of you, thou, and to me. The pahlavi then indicates the wicked one still held me. I have, however, elsewhere, as against tradition, rendered as if the root were dares, he has set his eye on me for vengeance. One might be tempted to read tat moe das tevem, that granting me, do thou speak forth for the faith, therefore that spiritual power for the faith declare. And with verse 8, in deeds attain me, the Pahlavi translator indicates the root saw by his resh, and so read alternatively, let him not wound us. The meaning, but contrawise, has been ventured on. The indication of the Pahlavi is in opposing Bhavan Padirak Yam Tunisno, and that would be but bearing back.